어머, 전화가 잘 안 들려서 그래. 어머,
Representative Sam Park, thank you so much for joining us here at the Ajumma Show. You're our first interview ever. Can you believe?
Yes, I can, but but thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes,
with you.
thank you so much for being here. What do you mean by you can believe you're the first one? Do you feel like we wouldn't really get great interviews?
No, absolutely not. Of course not.
Yeah. This is our show. We've been doing this show 143-ish episodes.
Oh.
And people have asked to come onto the show,
Hmm.
and we just don't know how to do it because Unji and I just talk to each other. A lot of times this isn't even a show.
Yeah.
You know, like we don't have much of most of the times we don't even know what we're going to be talking about. We just like flow from something that makes us angry into a piece of advice, and then we'll talk about something Korean and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
A lot of reviews of our podcast say, I'm not really sure how to like explain your podcast to anyone, but thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I know you're very busy.
Yeah, you make me feel even more special for being your first. So
Wow, I'm so excited. Well, Sam, you know, in the past, 4 years we've been doing this show, we talk a lot about politics. Obviously, it's front and center. We started this show February of 2017, right when, you know, it all happened. And we've been screaming into the microphone because we realized that there's so much that it hasn't been talked about, especially you know, racially and in the Korean American community. We just don't talk. We're not talkers. We don't really have a great vocabulary with our family about politics, about anything related to race or even money. You know, like most Koreans are just taught, hey, just keep your head down and make money and you'll be fine and don't bother anyone. So and throughout the last 4 years, Unji and I have been talking about Korean politicians, people getting involved on the local level, on the state level, and obviously, you know, hopefully in the national level. And the fact that you are a Korean American, you're openly gay, and you're a politician for a conservative southern state, we had to talk to you. So we're very excited.
Yeah.
So we have a list of questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
You can pass anytime,
Mm-hmm.
but it will count against your score.
Sounds good. I'll try and get my A++.
All right. So, Sam Park, first of all, what the hell is your job?
So I'm a state representative, and in Georgia, we have a part-time legislature where we will meet for 40 non-consecutive days at the state capitol in downtown Atlanta, and essentially pass all the laws that affect 10 million people, and for those who call Georgia home. And of course, that impacts everything from health to education to roads and bridges and you know, the whole 9 yards.
Wow. And I did do some research on you. And by research, I mean I skimmed through your Wikipedia.
Hmm.
And it says you are part of the 101st HD?
Yes. Yeah.
Now, what does HD stand for?
HD stands for House District.
House District. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're part of the 101st. Now, is that House District, what's the demographics of that House District?
Yeah.
Is it a lot of Koreans or did you is this where you grew up?
So it's funny because oftentimes when I meet people for the first time, they're like, how is it that Georgia elected an openly gay Korean American millennial to their legislature? And the reality is that I'm actually quite representative of the district I represent. It's majority minority, the median age is 36 years old, and it just, in my mind, represents a lot of the generational change, the demographic changes that are occurring through the state. So my district is located in the heart of Gwinnett County, the most diverse county in the southeastern United States. By population, it's the second largest in the state of Georgia. And so really it's the epicenter of a lot of change that we're currently seeing. I grew up in and around the Gwinnett area. It's where about 50% of the Korean community in Georgia lives. There's about 100,000 Korean Americans in Georgia. There's a lot. And
100,000?
Yes. Yeah. So I think has the third largest Korean American population in the country after LA and New York. But my district, it's not, it's kind of next to, not directly in the Korean district itself. But, again, it's the diversity, it's the youth in which, that gave me an opportunity to serve.
That's amazing. And the fact that you went out in 2016, and this was a pretty grassroots campaign, I'm assuming, right? Like a young Korean guy from Georgia. Even though you say there's 100,000 Koreans, that's really not much if you think about it, as far as like absolute value of population. And that's just stunning for me. So like, tell me a little bit about how you decided to get into civil service. And also, if this wasn't the original plan, what was the original plan?
So I had no intention of entering into politics. When I was in law school, and I originally went to law school because I thought that was the fastest way to financial stability, which I think is something that which I think is what every immigrant seeks in one form or another, especially when they first come to this country. But through I took a health legislation and advocacy course during my second year, which opened the door to the Georgia State Capitol. I had an opportunity to intern for Stacey Abrams, and really fell in love with the legislative process. Public policy is really trying to solve all the politics aside, the policy component. You're trying to solve very complex systemic challenges. With equally complex solutions that would be up to the task to make progress on the issue or to remedy the problem altogether. All of that said, I ended up running for office after my mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer in 2014. That whole experience taught me how important access to healthcare is. At the same time, Republicans in our state, they blocked Medicaid expansion, leaving more than 500,000 Georgians without access to healthcare. And so her battle inspired me to run for office and to fight for uninsured Georgians, which is a battle that I still fight today.
Very cool. So you didn't originally think about going into politics. You were like, hey, let me be a lawyer. Let me make some money. Let me get my parents to back off. I did a very similar thing where my grandma was like, hey, you have the gift of gab. You have a mouth that won't stop running. So why don't you use that and become a buksa, a pastor? And my whole family was like, oh, yeah, that's going to be good. That's good. That's respectful. Pastors in our church drive a Mercedes-Benz. It's going to be great. And then my mom was like, no, pastors don't make money. Use that mouth to become a lawyer because lawyers make money. So I had a very similar introduction into oh, maybe I'll go to law school. And then halfway through high school, I was like, nah, I don't have it. I don't have the discipline. I just don't care about school enough. I just want to be creative. I wanted to be a chef. And my mom went completely bonkers, and she's like, "You're gonna go to college. I'm gonna come here for you to become a chef." And then I went into tech for a long time, and then pivoted and became a comedian. And here we are now. You and I, two very respected gay Koreans in America. But good for you. So your mom, she had this terminal cancer. Is she still with us now?
She passed away in 2018.
I'm so sorry. 2018. Okay, gotcha. So that's pretty recent. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
In 2018, I saw that you ran again, and you won with 50-something% of the votes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Again. So Georgia State Rep, you have to run every 2 years?
Yes.
So is another one coming up?
Yes, so I have an election. I'll be on the ballot on November 3rd.
Whoa.
Everyone else, yeah.
Oh wow, very cool. That's
Yeah.
awesome. How are you feeling about this year's election for you versus the past two?
So, my first election in 2016, no one thought I really had a shot at winning. I popped out of nowhere, openly gay, young gay Korean, running against a, three-term Republican chairwoman who lived in the district for 30 years, was very well respected. And so I shocked a lot of folks. I think I was one of two Democrats that had won in the state against all odds. Thankfully, there were a few who did believe in me and saw the hard work that I was doing. One of those being Stacey Abrams, and she was really supportive and critical toward the end. In 2018, it was very much the same approach, though, of course, being an incumbent, I had a bit of an advantage, was able to raise more money, was able to build a bigger team, and really harnessed a lot of the acceleration and the changes, the demographic changes that I had first identified, and so won by nearly 20 points. Going into my third reelection this November, I feel like I'm in a very strong position right now. That said, I still have to raise dollars. I do have a general election opponent, a Republican woman who's running against me. I feel confident I'll have another opportunity to serve, but right now, once I kind of make sure that I have a reelection strategy and campaign in place, it's to do everything I can to turn out Asian Americans statewide, young people, and to help build a new majority in the state house. So it's still very busy. Yeah.
That's I almost said fucking awesome, and I took it back because I was like, I'm with a politician, but
You're fine.
I'm fine, right? That's okay. I can say fuck.
Yeah, you can say whatever you want.
That's fucking cool, Sam. That's something that I never talked to another Korean person about, is their re-election strategy. What a cool thing that you're doing. And for, I'm in entertainment, and I always talk about this to like producers or people I'm talking to, studios, networks, that how important representation is, because, when you and I were growing up, you look a bit younger than I am. I'm pushing 40, but I can play 28. And I
Same
talk
here.
to, yeah.
I'm 34,
we have the secret.
So
You're
not far
34.
behind you. Yeah.
Okay, so you're how old am I? 38. So you're 4 years younger than me. In 1986, you were born?
85.
85. Okay, so not even that far. So you look very young, and I'm sure that you hear that outside when you meet people. People are like, "Oh my God, you're a baby," and I think that does help. But going back to the representation thing, like when we were growing up, we didn't see Asians in entertainment, much less Asians in politics, right? So especially when you're a young, impressionable kid. Even though I loved comedy, I wanted to act. I watched Korean dramas growing up, and always thought like, oh, maybe I could be one of these guys one day if I moved to Korea. But I never even bridged the gap of like, I can do it right here in the home of Hollywood. I live in America, So the fact that you decided to go into politics and stay in politics as a Korean American is so fucking cool, because now kids are going to be able to look up and say, oh, there's a leader that looks like me. I can enact change. I thought government was for white people. And I still kind of think that, like, of course, I know it's not. And there's plenty of Asian Americans involved in government in all levels. But the amount the media shows a face like yours, that's powerful, because the exposure it allows us to dream that, as opposed to just think of it as something that only people that look like my friend Keith do. You know what I mean? Like have you just being there is revolutionary in itself. So kudos to you. That's really awesome.
Thank you.
And I hope you win. And I don't even know really your platform, but I don't care. You know what I mean? I don't really care. And I know that's not a good way to look at politics. Like, he looks like me. Great. But like, I don't really give a fuck, because like I already know you're going to, like, knowing your story, how to get in, how you got into politics, and knowing that you're part of the Democratic Party and you're fighting against, this GOP that really feels to me, and not being from Georgia and growing up in New York and now living in California, I'm sure Georgia is a very different view of what's going on. But in your words, what do you think is going on with the Grand Old Party?
I think the Grand Old Party has been completely taken over by Trumpism and Trump. And through that, we're seeing the rise of a white nationalist fascism, which is incredibly, incredibly dangerous and very terrifying. I think, especially after watching Trump speak last night, it reinforced all those ideas in which, don't believe reality, don't believe what you see or hear, just listen to me, follow me.
Yeah.
And we are seeing that. We've seen essentially the complete takeover of the Republican Party, in which, I don't know if you saw or not, there was a poll that came out saying 57% of Republicans believe that, 170,000 dead Americans is an acceptable number, right? I think I saw another poll saying around 70% of Republicans think that the economy is better today than it was 4 years ago. Despite the fact that we are seeing, 20 million unemployed Americans and an unemployment rate that's comparable to the Great Depression. And so I think these are very, very dangerous times in which we're living in, and we need to understand and act accordingly to make sure that we don't continue further down this path that we've already taken.
Yeah. It feels like the GOP of my youth, which my mom heavily was a fan of. I don't know if your family had this, like coming from Korea, like my whole family were Reagan heads.
Mm-hmm.
They loved Ronald Reagan. They loved that he was a movie star. He was the handsome guy. He opened up immigration. He did a lot of good for Koreans. And then that really, a lot of New York City Koreans I knew, they didn't really vote or were involved in politics, but if they had to, they would have voted GOP. And that tends to happen a lot to immigrant communities where because it's so hard for them to get what we were talking about, stability, a sense of security, that we're living in this sense of fear a lot. And because of this fear, we're, people who are in power tend to redirect that fear against each other, and that's something that I really want to express. I mean, people who listen to this podcast we're preaching to the choir. You know what I mean? We have a niche audience of femme forward energy, whether it's biologically or whatever, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Overeducated, and with expendable income. You know what I mean? So we have a very specific group, and they tend to be very progressive because they're listening to two angry queer Koreans screaming. Like, why else would you be listening to this? So I understand when we talk to our audience, we are kind of preaching to the choir. But something that, especially with George Floyd and BLM and the issue with Breonna Taylor still, this was the first time I was able to bridge a conversation between myself and my like woke ass queer ass Korean people and our parents and our families, and to talk about Black lives, to talk about anti-Blackness and a concerted effort towards anti-racism. And this was the first time I ever had that conversation with my parents or with my family, because before this, it just was annoying, to talk to them, even, trying to translate something through English into Korean.
Right.
So my question to you is, how do we reach Korean Americans that are just not interested, that don't feel like they're involved, or the election's never really for them? Oh, it's only rich white people who fight it out. My vote doesn't count, which we all know is not true. But how do you go about kind of fixing that?
Yeah. So for me, I think especially in light of the rise of fascism we're seeing embodied by Trump, enabled by the Republican Party, one of the cases that I've been trying to make as often and as loudly as I can is that we are in the fight for our democracy, right? And when we're talking about our democracy, South Korea has one of the strongest, models of that in the Asia Pacific region. And so I know that they understand that, especially freedom from Japanese colonialism. That said, when we're talking about our democracy, it's not necessarily a matter of one candidate or one race. It's about empowering the people. It's about empowering your community to, one, protect yourselves, and then two, to determine the direction in which you want to go. And so especially when I'm talking to older first generation Korean American, 해장님들 and other, community business leaders, that's kind of the piece of knowledge I try to impart to them, which is you have to get involved if you want to maintain the freedom in which you have. But more importantly, I think, especially as we're seeing the rise in discrimination and hate crimes against Asian Americans caused by Trump and Republicans using racist rhetoric, we have to protect our families. We have to protect our communities, because that's also at risk here. And if you don't get involved, that's implied consent to allow Republicans and Trump to continue to castigate and instigate and try and pit one community against the other. That said, I think, especially for woke Koreans and for progressives, like, we need to be very intentional over the next 60, 65 days or so to bring more people into the political process, right? We need to expand the electorate, turn out the vote, engage young people, the next generation in particular. I think, you had referenced this earlier, but, the first generation, like they especially, first generation immigrants, for the most part, they come here to help build that economic stability and foundation for us. The challenge I think we have as, I don't know what you call it, second generation or first generation born here, but we have to pioneer our own paths, right? We feel that conflict, that tension between, the culture of our motherland and the very individualistic culture, Western culture. And when all is said and done, again, we have to figure out the best way in which we can live our best lives. But in the same way, I think we have to be very intentional in ensuring that those who are coming after us, the next generation, that they are involved, right? Even if we can't necessarily convince our parents' generation to do so. One of the hopes that I have between now and November is if the millennial generation, if Gen Z, 18-year-olds, if they vote at comparable levels as baby boomers and older generations, you will see a tidal wave of change come this November.
Very cool. I think I completely agree with you. I think turning out the youth vote is going to be essential for us. Looking at the numbers, especially the Asian voter turnout last time in 2016, it was abysmal. We were at something like a little above 50% nationally that the Asian American vote came out, and that's unacceptable. And I think this year, especially with the 4 years of Trump, a lot of people have opened their eyes. Even people like my family who just wanted to make money and they don't care. They're like, this doesn't affect us. But that's exactly what we need to dispel, is that it doesn't affect you. It affects all of us. And the more we are participating in our elections and in our democracy is how the democracy stays alive. And I think I think back into the 80s, a lot of the Koreans I grew up in New York City, just kind of only worried about making the golden six figure, getting out of debt, and buying that house in the suburbs and being left alone. This idea really starts to decay democracy, because you clearly are here not to participate in it and to always undercut it or subvert it, right? And that's how I grew up in New York. Although I always say that my dad's side of Koreans are like the rednecks of Koreans, they did they did everything they can to not fold into the fabric of society. They were always trying to stay above or under the law, and that is a very immigrant thing, and because we don't think this government or this country is made for us, so we create a tertiary system or a black market of sorts or whatever. Did your parents or family ever do keton? Do people in Georgia do that?
They do.
Do
They
they?
do. But like that was something new I learned because like my, my mom's side, we come from North Korea,
Oh,
right?
my
Like,
dad's side.
yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe that's what it is. But it's just like you don't talk about anything like that, right? You just keep to yourself. You isolate, right?
Yeah.
But one thing I would say is like I think one thing I've recognized about the Korean community is that we're very independent minded, right? Like one, you'll find Koreans around the world engaged in all sorts of business, living everywhere. But again, despite the fact that we come from a very like neo-Confucianism, collectivistic society, but we're very independent minded, especially when it comes to politics and other issues. But yeah.
That exact thing is something that Unji and I have been talking about the last 3 months of this podcast, is this idea of this kind of like stretching apart and splitting apart of identities for a Korean American, with that neo-Confucianism background and this highly capitalistic, individual freedom obsessed, money Americanism that our parents really bought into, because they were like, whatever was happening in Korea wasn't working for us, so we're gonna have to come here and dig out our own future for the family. And I think about that a lot, and how the two-party system has really ruined democracy. If you really break it down, it's an illusion of choice the way we elect people, because we only put up one person per party, and a lot of times those two people, whatever party they are, it seems like they're just kind of doing the same thing but for a different constituency. How do you see the future of the Democratic Party evolving, if you think it should evolve, slash do you think there is a better way to go about elections?
So all great questions. Being on the DNC national stage a week or two ago, and
congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
That was the coolest thing ever. So, not to cut you off, but yeah. I heard that you were the first Asian American to be first Gaysian American.
First Gaysian, sure, yeah.
To speak on a national level at the DNC.
Yeah.
That's fucking amazing. How cool. That is the coolest thing ever, Sam. How do you feel about that?
So, when I first got the call, I thought it was a prank call. I was like, who is this? What do you want?
Who called you?
I think it was someone from the DNC.
Was it Joe Biden?
No, it wasn't Joe Biden. But I straight up thought it was a prank call, and thankfully didn't say some of the words that had come to mind.
Yeah.
But no, I thought it was, a very like humbling recognition of kind of the work that I was doing in Georgia, and the kind of leader that I want to be, which is, more of a servant leader, in which like, one, I'm not involved in this work because I'm trying to attain a title or a position, but because I actually care about the issues that I'm working on. And then of course, trying to help lift the next generation of leaders up to the best of my ability as well. So that was really cool. I think U.S. Senator Daniel Inouye from Hawaii is the first Asian American to ever address the DNC convention. And I know that I'm one of 3 of the first openly LGBTQ folks to ever give a keynote address, which again is a huge honor. And just, I think part of the legacy of a lot of LGBTQ leaders breaking barriers and helping to pave the way for the next generation of leaders. All of that to say, I thought I thought they did that very well, and that the hopes of the Democratic Party are not pinned on one individual or one leader, but that it demonstrates that it's a matter of all of us being in this together. I don't know if that comes across cheesy or at all, but I think it's a renewal of our democratic principles of power being from we the people. And especially as America is changing, we represent the diversity of this country, and we represent, the future, being that we are diverse. That's circular, but at the same time, I think it was important to demonstrate that there was unity in the midst of that diversity, unity in American values and American principles, and of course our desire, our unified effort to get Biden elected and to get rid of Trump this November.
Awesome. Yeah.
The second part of your question.
Yes.
In terms of what reforms we need in order to strengthen our democracy, I think, we're seeing a lot of cracks in the system at a foundational level in which there needs to be systemic reform, to continue to protect the representative democratic system, our republic. That said, ranked choice voting, I think, is a great way of better reflecting the will of the people. Taking money out of politics, I think, is absolutely critical. And then getting rid of partisan primaries and independent redistricting reform. I think those are all important reforms that I think would go a very, very long way of ensuring that the democratic system that we've inherited can be passed on to the next generation and improved upon.
Awesome. Very good. 2 more questions for you. I know you're very busy, and I just want to thank you for being here. Although my co-host Unji did not show up, we're gonna have to drag her for that. She is a mother of a small child, and she has a lot going on. But this is embarrassing for both of us. Love you, Unji. Yeah. All right, so Sam, you are openly gay. You are openly Korean. Where are the gay Koreans?
San Francisco.
Good answer.
I went to San Francisco like a year or two ago, like to the Castro, and like I thought I died and went to like gay Asian heaven because I had never seen so many gay Asians in my life, especially being born and raised in Georgia and living here for most of my life. So.
Wow, that's got to be so tough. I was born and raised in New York City. And I didn't come out till I moved to San Francisco in 2005. Like I had this idea of like going to the Mecca of all things Gaysian, and I'll be safe to come out. I'll be away from all my family, people I know, all my high school friends that I had to pretend to be straight with, even after being in San Francisco, close to the Castro, being inundated by everything gay and Asian, it took me a long time to come out. So for you, being born and raised in Georgia, and now working as a professional in Georgia, what was it like you coming out as a Korean person in the South?
It was very hard. When I was like 12, 13 years old, that's when I saw on the news Matthew Shepard being, brutally tortured and murdered. And so growing up, I was always very scared, especially as I was coming to my own and learning about my own sexual identity and orientation. I was terrified of someone finding out that I was gay. And of course, I grew up in a very conservative Korean culture, but also a religious household. I grew up a Southern Baptist, believe it or not. I tell folks I had the triple whammy and I still turned out gay. So it says something about the power of the gay. Yeah. But when I was around 18 years old, for me, it was, I knew that I was gay and I had a choice of, am I going to accept my truth or am I going to live a lie for the rest of my life? And so for me, like I decided, like I can't live a lie. I have a hard time telling a lie, period, just because I could show on my face. So I decided to come out at the very least to myself, which was that first step. That didn't necessarily mean like I was screaming it from the mountaintops, like, hey, look, a Gaysian's here.
Yeah, you're whispering it to yourself.
But my sister, I told my sisters probably a year or two later. My mom found out a year or two after that, and it really broke her heart. For her, especially coming from such a conservative religious mindset, being taught that homosexuality is an abomination and a sin, for her, it almost shattered her worldview. And so she took it very, very hard. It did damage my relationship with my mom for a number of years, though especially as as I was taking care of her after she was diagnosed, we became very close and talked about all these issues. And I can say definitively that, no matter whether I'm gay or straight, like, she loves me for who I am, unequivocally. And I think, especially for immigrant parents, right? I think there's a lot of fear in their child being gay, in that they know that it's going to be harder for them. And I'm sure, a parent just wants to do what they can to protect and make sure that their kid is successful. And so I think part of the fear that they demonstrate is the fear for our own safety and well-being.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I'll add is, I came out mostly to just friends and family in Georgia, and I had a great diverse group of friends in which, they became my family, as gay folks will often do. We find our family. When I ran in 2016, it was a very interesting experience because, running as an openly gay candidate, it doesn't mean I introduce myself as an openly gay man. But if someone asks, I don't deny. I say, yes, I'm openly gay. This is another reason why I'm running as a Democrat, especially after Republicans passed, anti-LGBTQ legislation. But my family in New York and California found out that I was gay through a newspaper after it received national headlines that Georgia elected first openly gay man.
Wow.
And so it was, it was a bittersweet moment in that, everyone was so ecstatic the first day that I won. And then after the second day after I received all these headlines, because I didn't think it'd be a big deal, to be honest with you. Maybe that's a bit of my naivete. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. But that said, again, I am who I am, and I haven't really changed in that respect. And I think, with family, they're cool with it because I'm just still me.
Sure, of course, and that's what it all comes down to, is this kind of abolishment of that inherent fear of the unknown, or they're going to be persecuted, or oh God, we don't even have our papers. It's like that kind of inherent fear of being found out or being fucked with by a group of people or even a government that is not here to protect you. And the fact that you, coming from an immigrant family, a Southern Baptist family, and conservative Koreans, to break through all that and really just step into your truth publicly, that's such a cool, inspiring thing. So I just want to say thank you for doing that. I know you have no other choice but to be yourself, but hey, there are a lot of us out there who can't do it, or who are having trouble doing it. So the fact that it was hard for, it's not like you had parents who were like, yeah, go to dance class. Let's support this, artsy, weird, gay Korean kid. I know it was not that, just from the way you talk about it. And it must have been so hard. And the fact that it was so hard for me, I know that it must have been doubly, triply as hard for you, just being from where you were from. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for anybody who is struggling with coming out, right? I mean, I was terrified, and it's probably one of the hardest things that I had to do. But when all is said and done, you have one life to live. How do you want to live it? And I think we have to grapple with that question and deciding whether or not to come out. And I hope people will, again, live their best lives, and live their truth and be who they are.
Amazing. One last question for you, Representative Sam Kim.
Sam
Park. Sorry, I'm thinking about myself. My brother's name is Sam Kim, so I can't. I was like, I typed your name in wrong every single time. Sam Park. One last question for you. You win this election in 2020. You'd serve another 2 years, and so that's 3 terms as a state rep. What's in the future for you?
So so when I first got elected, I felt like I got catapulted 10,000 feet into the air, right? And part of how I got to where I am is because I felt like I was focusing on who I could help, what issue I wanted to address, and to essentially allow that to be my guide. So my number one prerogative right now is to do as much good with the opportunity I've been given. We'll see where that leads me. One of the things that I feel very committed to accomplishing is to expand access to healthcare in the state of Georgia, because that's the original reason why I ran. And if that requires changing the political foundation, then so be it, which is the work that I'm currently engaged in. If there are greater opportunities to run for higher office, I'm open to it, of course. But I think when all is said and done, if I want to remain grounded and authentic and sincere as to like myself and to be a good leader when all is said and done, I think it's more, I need to figure out, like, in terms of that next step, again, what I want to do in terms of who I want to help, and then allow that to, lead me to wherever. That said, again, I'm open to whatever opportunities may come my way.
President?
I don't know. That sounds like a lot of work. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Well, Sam, whether you're POC or white or Democrat, Republican, the fact that we have someone like you who can't tell a lie because it's all over their face, and someone who's leading with truth and integrity, we need more leaders like you. So thank you so much for coming on the Ajumma show. The fact that you're also gay Korean makes it so cool that you're the only interview we've ever done.
Yeah.
And I hope more Koreans and, other POC can watch this and listen to this and be inspired by you and your story, and really get out especially my job, my personal mission for this year is to move the needle a little bit with the Asian American vote, because that's the platform I have. You obviously have a larger platform, dealing with your constituents from your House district. And the fact that we can do this together and spread the word and spread the importance of getting the vote out this election, the fact that I can do this with you is so cool. And this could only something that like my parents could have even dreamed of, that two gay Koreans could sit here and talk about politics in America. I think we did it. We're doing it. So thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I feel, again, very privileged and special to be your first interviewee. And let's roll up our sleeves and get the work done.
Awesome. Thank you, Representative Sam Park. Yay!
Thank you.
Hey, 고맙습니다.
Hey, 감사합니다.
Yeah. All right. So that's the end of the interview. I'm just going to press stop. Okay. And you can press stop on your phone if you like. And then you want to just, I guess, what's the best way to transfer files, you think? Do you have like a Google Drive?
Yeah, I mean, if this file is too large to send to you via email, I can send it, I'll add it to my Google Drive and share that with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Well, it's Friday. What do you have going on for the rest of the day?
Work.
You're working?
So I mean, I am an attorney, and I'm an attorney for a nonprofit health center working to end the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the Metro Atlanta area, and it's really bad here. One, because we don't have access to healthcare, of course, but like two, the CDC estimated that 50% of all young Black gay men are expected to contract HIV by the age of 30.
Oh my
right?
God.
Yeah, it's like a third world country. So that's what I do in my private time, I guess. Because again, I'm a part-time legislature. But
your job as a state rep isn't a full-time job?
It is and it isn't, right? Like I'm at the Capitol for like the first quarter of every year, first 3 months or so, but then the rest of the time, you're just at home, doing your other job, but you're constantly replying to constituents who reach out. And especially now, like, I mean, it's just a barrage of emails asking for help with unemployment, who are asking for housing assistance, who are, on the verge of going homeless. And so it's just, it's a tough time.
Damn. Well, you're doing the Lord's work. Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you. Is there any last thing you'd like us to know about you before we go?
I mean, just ask. But one thing I would say is just like keep up the good work that you're doing as well, because keep in mind you're breaking barriers, demonstrating to other Koreans, and we're very we're creatives, right? That you can be successful in any arena that you go into, and just be fearless, follow your passion, all that good stuff. So
I love it. Thank you so much.
Keep up your good work too. Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. Thanks. See ya.
Bye.